The Bringers of Flame detachment is a very popular one. Its rule is pretty simple, and if you've played the Salamanders with their Firestorm detachment, or any of the Space Marines with their Firestorm Assault detachment, you'll know what it can do. You can advance and still shoot because all the weapons have assault, and when you're within 12 inches, you add 1 to the strength characteristics of the weapons. This can be really useful for changing bolt guns to strength 5, so they can do a lot more damage. Flamer weapons, which were already strength 5, become strength 6, a much better strength. And our melter weapons, which were an awkward strength 9, become strength 10, and now we're wounding light vehicles on a 3+ like it's 9th edition. But the stratagems are focusing on the transports, much like the Firestorm Assault detachment. And transports are key to getting your units close so that you're in that 12-inch range to strike the enemy. So what happens if you choose to have no transports? Does it still work? Are the sisters that good? If I had some sort of channel intro or sting, then it would be here. I'm Christian von Carmian. I don't like painting tanks. They're boring, they're big and have a lot of flat panels that take far longer to paint than a regular model. You can show off a completed model for a unit in progress and people will see it and think that's good. You can't show off a half-painted tank and get any response other than, yeah, I'm sure it'll look good when it's finished. So, no tanks. Well, maybe an exorcist. It isn't a transport, so that doesn't break my self-imposed rule for this detachment of including it, but with no transports. Now, I've already done a video on mechanized transport sisters. But is the codex just that good? Are sisters so broken that you can run a detachment but not use the units that you should be taking? 3 of these stratagems require transports, so they would just be out. One of the stratagems gives lethal hits to a unit in combat. Any dedicated combat units outside of the Penitent Host detachment have a high price for their effectiveness, and the detachment rule, Fervent Purgation, won't give them any bonuses. So this stratagem is there to let a unit wound something tough in combat, and annoyingly, it's the same bonus that already appears on the Sacrosanct Maul and the Holy Blade of the Canoness, and the same ability that the Palatine gives a unit. So a Palatine is less required in this detachment, despite how cool you can make them. But that's another video to check out. So I will focus on the guns. This is a shooting detachment, make no mistake about it. I discourage you from bringing Repentier in this detachment or other close combat units as there is not a lot for them. So already, I am reduced to using 2 stratagems, Shield of Aversion and Cleansing Flame. With all of these restrictions imposed on myself, coming from Genestealer Cult, how does Bringers of the Flame feel to play? So for the 2 stratagems I will be using, the Shield of Aversion is great. It is Armour of Contempt. It's in all of the different Space Marine detachments, not just the Firestorm Assault detachment, and it means that you ignore 1 point of armor penetration with shooting or with combat. We can have great resistance on a lot of our Battle Sister units. If you have a 2+ save, -1 will basically double the number of failures, as you go from failing on a 1 to failing on a 1 or a 2. If you can keep that 2+ save, that's really tough. So it gives great resistance to a Battle Sister unit with an Imagifier. They have a 2+ save now. If you can keep them at that 2+ save, they're not going anywhere. Now you can add an Imagifier to a lot of Adepta Sororitas units, but in a Battle Sister squad, you can also add a Canoness. And then the Canoness can make this stratagem free. And that's a lot of bodies to get through. It's very tough. In general, I prefer the Hospitaller, because we get a 5+ feel no pain. Doesn't matter on the kind of armor penetration, it could be AP 0. Shield of Aversion is not going to do anything there, but that feel no pain is always going to be on. And if our Battle Sisters die, as long as they don't all get wiped out, and we can use Miracle Dice to pass some saves so that we know we won't get wiped out, in our next turn, we can throw a Miracle Dice away and the Hospitaller will bring back D3 +1 models. She is like the best versions of every other army's healer unit. Shield of Aversion is also great on Paragon Warsuits. They're pretty tough already. With Toughness 7, las cannons are now wounding them on a 3+, whereas in the Index it was wounding them on a 2+, and though there is an invulnerable save, much like with the Imagifier, if we can keep that squad to a 2+ save, they're not going to go down. Finally, they have the toughness that the models suggest they should have. So super speedy, super shooty, super stuff Paragon Warsuits are a lovely choice in this detachment. So what about Cleansing Flames? This lets you have torrent weapons cause devastating wounds. Yeah, melter weapons are still necessary, but if there's something really tough, and it has an invulnerable save and doesn't have a feel no pain, your flamer weapons can be used as anti-tank weapons as long as you have enough flamers. So to get even more flamer shots, if you add the enhancement Fire and Fury, then you get an extra shot on all of your turret weapons, and sustained hits on all of your other non-turret weapons. So that's good for a character that's joining Dominions, because remember, those sustained hits will work on bolters, and those bolt guns are going to be strength 5 when they're rapid firing. The bolt guns are not something you get if you were to join instead a heavy flamer retributor squad, and you'll probably want them to have multi-melters. You may just want to say that the 2 heavy flamers that you get in the box are multi-melters, because even people who are like, what you see is what you get, they don't much care about that. Our slightly weird flamers can just be used as multi-melters, and when the box gives you 2 multi-melters, 2 heavy bolters, and 2 heavy flamers, but you can have 4 of your sisters equipped with the same weapons, it's okay to proxy your heavy flamers as multi-melters. 5 retributors is the biggest squad size you can have. You can't add other battle sisters to back them up the same way you can with a Devastator squad, so you want to keep them safe, so you need to put them in a transport. I'll talk about that a bit later on, because I'm not using transports! We're talking about the Cleansing Flame stratagem, which is really good when you have the most torrent weapons possible. So on Dominions you can have 4 flamers, a hand flamer, and potentially a Priest Vindictor flamer. That's 6 flamers. For more effect, you want to think about 10 Seraphim and a jump cannoness with a hand flamer for 9 hand flamers. And don't forget about the sustained hits on your bolt pistols. This isn't just fire, it is also fury. 96 plus 9 shots, and their devastating wounds, and with a jump cannoness you can use that stratagem for free. That's a lot of value. We're going to talk about that more later. Now, even if you're going the sensible route in including transports, you should have units with flamers, and then they can use this stratagem. It doesn't just have to be exclusively for the unit that has the Fire and Fury enhancement. The detachment rule alone is great for speed and getting the bonuses to wound rolls. Despite the name of the detachment, you don't need flamers, but they work really well. Getting to strength 6, which our strength 5 flamers would do, is very important. We see more toughness 6 in 10th edition than before, and a lot more toughness 5. Orc hordes are the obvious example, but Tau battlesuits are also toughness 5. Melter weapons are now wounding them on 2s. Flamer weapons are wounding them on 3s. Bolter weapons are wounding them on 4s. Bye bye Tau battlesuits. And when you get to strength 6, you wound infantry that isn't in power armor that has a toughness of 3 on a 2+. When you're auto-hitting and then wounding on a 2+ against Hormigand hordes, that's really good for making them just disappear. They come close, you could even bait them closer with scouting dominions, overwatch them if you need to, that's still auto-hits. And remember that dominions can reactive move away from them so that their charge is harder. Flamers were already strength 5 for the sisters, and we have bolters that are strength 5, and we can get that into rapid fire range. Heavy bolters at strength 6 can punch through tanks and monsters at toughness 11 or less on a 5+, though that's when the armor penetration lets them down a bit. With this detachment, your regular girls are doing a lot of damage, and it's a shame that unlike in the Index, the simulacrums don't give you a miracle dice when you destroy an enemy unit, because I was destroying a lot of enemy units. You need to employ the battle standard babes if you want that ability. But my Dominions and Battle Sister squads, they were blowing enemies away. It was great. Flamers are nice, we want flamers, but really you want melter guns and multi-melters. They become strength 10 so they can finally wound vehicles easier. The light tanks of Rhino and equivalent are wounded on a 3+, the medium tanks like the Castigator level are wounded on a 4+. That's much better. Strength 10 is our cap, unless we drive an Exorcist or a Castigator right up into the enemy face. It's not a bad idea. Drive me closer and let me hit them point blank with my missile church is a fun concept. The Castigator is good. You can have either turret. You can always have either turret. Both of them are fine. In this detachment, I prefer the twin autocannons, but I couldn't find my twin autocannon bit, so I used a battle cannon. It works perfectly well. If I wanted something that stays at the back and fires strength 10 shots, I do prefer the Exorcist, but if I'm getting closer, advancing and shooting and supporting my sisters at close range so that they get extra armor penetration, the Castigator does it and the twin autocannons get more shots. So let's look at the list and the power it has, and I'll explain a bit more about how my games went. Yes, I am no mere armchair theorist. I am in the trenches with you, playtesting these lists to give you real experienced advice. Here's my 1000 point list for playing it without transports. It's very much a toss-up whether you have Dominions or Battle Sisters. You get to decide which one you like better. I went for 2 squads of each. One squad of Dominions has melter guns, well 4 melter guns, the maximum allowed, and they fight monsters, vehicles and enemy multi-wound infantry. The other Dominions have flamers, and they are joined by a Ministorum Priest with the Vindictor. So that's a unit that has 6 flamer weapons, and they are fire and fury, which means more shots from the flamer weapons, and also potentially more shots from all the bolt guns in the squad. Even on foot, the Ministorum Priest can scout with them because of the Holy Mission special ability that the Ministorum Priest has. These 2 Dominion units are the Hammer. They're fast moving, and they're doing enough damage at this game size to kill or seriously damage most threats. The Battle Sisters are the Anvil. In this detachment I have an Imagifier leading one of the Sisters units, and they go in the centre, because you can get better miracle dice when units die around her. There's also the Canoness in the squad. This squad has a Flamer and a Heavy Flamer, and the Superior has a Hand Flamer. All the Superiors in the Sisters and Dominion squad should have Hand Flamers, because they are a really good weapon in the Bringers of Flame detachment. And the reason for the Flamer focus in this squad is because if the Canoness hasn't used her free stratagem this battle round on Shield of Aversion, she could use it on Cleansing Flames. It's free, so why not? Then, the more Flamers you have, the better. In the second squad of Battle Sisters, I have the Hospitaller to say, "Get up girls, you're not done yet." They will take a flank, and they have a melter gun and a multi-melter to help out with dealing with the big problems. But right at the start, the Battle Sisters will sticky the home objective and then move up. The secondary missions are more about the mid-board objectives, and at 1000 points you don't have too many units. But you have the same number of objectives, and you have the same number of secondary missions as at a 2000 point game. But even then, the sister squads don't complete the actions on the objectives, they shoot the enemies. The action monkeys do the actions with a screen of sisters to protect them. That is what the 3 Archoflagellants and the 2 Crusaders do. If this was a tournament where legends were not allowed, and it would be an unusual event to run 1000 point games, but then you could swap out the 2 Crusaders for 3 more Archoflagellants, but you would have to drop the Fire and Fury enhancement from the Preacher. Oh hey, maybe the points will go down for sisters in the near future and you won't need to do that. I tried saying that with a straight face, I really did. Having cheap characters in place of these units also works, something like the Dialogus, and the Canoness could be deployed alone if need be, but she'll probably want the Iron Surplus if she does that. I'll explain later why she's a good choice to act alone. The 5 Seraphim also complete secondary missions as needed. They have the speed to fly around and get into table quarters. If they're able to shoot something, that lets them move an extra 6 inches. So they can go to table quarters, they can contain board edges, and fly back to your deployment zone to protect your home objective if it's threatened. And the Castigator shoots at whatever you want dead, even infantry. Then the sisters get better at making it dead. The heavy bolters could shoot at something, while the cannon shoots at something else. As long as one of the enemy units you shoot at takes a hit, then the special ability of the Castigator can activate. The Battle Sister units are really hard to break. You can have Tau Breacher squads fire at them, platoons of Imperial Guard fire at them, and that Hospitaller will keep them safe. If it's something else that's firing at the other squad, then the 2+ save keeps them alive, you still hold the objective, and you have a lot of objective control 2 bodies, so they can't even bully you off it by throwing all of their models onto the same objective. And if that is their mission, don't forget that you have Overwatch, so you can fire your flamers from your Imagifier Battle Sister squad and strip away things like termagants that have high objective control, and we're gonna try and take that objective from you just by having a lot more bodies than you. Even if they weren't attacking you, even if they were just trying to move block you, now there's fewer of them and you still hold the objective. And while the Seraphim used to be the hit and run kind of unit that the Battle Sisters had because they had special rule, hit and run, that meant that they could flee from combat, now Dominions are very much our hit and run unit, because you move up, with an advance, you shoot, and in the enemy's turn you get your reactive move to move behind cover, or move further away from them, or move onto an objective that they thought they could just have. At 1000 points there are not too many units that have decent objective control, and also have the killing power to wipe out 10 Dominions. Battle Sisters are in a pretty good place at 1000 points. Genestealer Cult too, but that's a totally different army and totally different conversation. The Battle Sisters can out-elite elite armies and counter the hordes of Horde armies. Just make sure that even if you're not fighting Tyranids, you shoot the big ones first. Get rid of the enemy combat tanks and elite units as soon as possible so that all they have left is the little things. We can deal with the little things. Going up to 2,000 points, we have the same basic tactics. The Dominions strike while the Sisters hold objectives. I went with 2 squads of Dominions with melter guns, 1 with flamers, because you have much more elite units and elite troops there at 2,000 points than you do at 1,000 points. At 1,000 points, people are trying to get as many models on the board so that they can actually hold all the objectives. 2,000 points, they're coming in to kill you as well. I have 3 Paragon warsuits, and they want to have multi-melters, they want to have grenade launchers, and then it's like either way on the swords or the mauls. I went with 2 swords, 1 maul, but that's from the index, but never mind. It doesn't matter anymore because we no longer use the maul for tank shock. The Paragon warsuits are there to zoom forward using the Triumph of St. Catherine, where you always want the bonus speed. This is a detachment about speed. If you can have even more speed, that's even better. This gives you the speed without needing the transports. The Triumph of St. Catherine will want to stay hidden because it has no bodyguard. Depending on your terrain collection or the kind of tournament you're at, terrain varies depending on the organization, there should be somewhere to keep it safe, and then you've got to plan your army around that situation. If we had an Immolator, I could have split a Battle Sister squad and then have 5 Sisters with the Triumph to give it a bit more protection. Because 18 wounds does not make you a tank when you are toughness 3. The 5 Seraphim squad is there to drop into the enemy deployment zone when you need to complete secondary missions there, while the Flying Canoness and the 10 Seraphim, they can be in our deployment zone, and if there are any enemy infiltrators sent to block us, they can fly over them. And blocking things is something that our novitiates do. It's pretty normal with infiltrators, and I've suggested it many times before with the Genestealer cult. If we start on an objective with the novitiates, we get a useful miracle dice if we go first, and then you can move up with the novitiates to block the enemy first turn movement. You don't have to charge them, you don't even need to shoot them, you just stand there and make rude gestures at them. The Castigator is valuable for adding additional armor penetration to our higher strength in this detachment, and it can also offset the benefit of cover that the units will be getting in your opponent's army when you're firing the Exorcist at them. The Exorcist is there because there will be something, like our Triumph for St. Catherine equivalent, that's going to be hiding, doesn't want to get shot, and really doesn't want to take loads of missiles to the head. We can make sure those missiles indirectly rain down on its head and we get rid of a problem. You can also fire the Exorcist directly at an enemy and then we're hitting on a 3+. The indirect fire is an option, not a requirement. And we have the same blocks of Battle Sisters with the Imagifier, with the Hospitaller. I found that one of each works pretty well in this detachment, even though I do have 2 Hospitaller models and 2 Imagifier models. The Palatine in the Battle Sister squad is a unwelcome surprise for when the enemy charges you. Then we throw a load of miracle dice into Righteous Rage and do as much damage as we can. When fighting orcs, the flamer weapons are really useful, and the melters can take down the trucks so very easily. When I've been fighting Tau, the Strength 6 flamers and the Strength 10 melter weapons really love battlesuits. When the battlesuits are dropping in, I did take a beating, but the Triumph let me electric slide the warsuits over there, and with the Flying Canoness and Seraphim to fight fire with fire from the flamer battlesuits, there was enough to counter the Tau Deep Strike, and at the same time, the Battle Sisters are running around making every objective sticky and scoring as many secondary objectives as possible. And when playing Imperial Guard, we have quite a lot of bodies in this army that gives you the weight of fire to counter the enemy hordes like Traitor, Imperial Guard, while the warsuits find the right moment to go for the bigger tanks. You don't want to ever have the warsuits out in the open. They always want to be hidden and then moving as fast as possible. Although we can advance and shoot in this detachment, there is no advance and charge. But the warsuits are fast, and faster with the Triumph, so from there you can get close, fire your multi-melters, and then charge because they have a special rule that makes them very good at fighting vehicles. And I prefer both shooting and charging as opposed to advancing and then shooting, though that will depend very much on the situation you end up in. So this detachment can work without transports. But with transports, you can do so much more, and you are running it as intended. So, Fire and Fury is great with Seraphim, that's the best place for it, but it's getting expensive. 10 Seraphim plus the Canoness plus the enhancement. You really have to get your points worth and have this as one of your key damage dealers. If you're playing a Crusade mission from one of the Crusade books, it's okay, but if using the mission deck, which you can do in Crusade mode now with White Dwarf 502, then 2 units of Seraphim and a lone Canoness can be better for completing missions. But with more jump pack units, I think I prefer the Army of Faith. And playing the Bringers of Flame detachment even sensibly with transports was what cemented my preference for Army of Faith. The potential is so much higher. These are the miracle dice I got with one of my Bringers of Flame battles. You can't fix that with the Manual of St. Griselda. But if I was the Army of Faith, I could have had so many more wands, and maybe some that weren't wands. But I would have taken an army list that was more kitted out for spending miracle dice anywhere and everywhere. Palatines, Hospitallers, Morwen Val, Dialogus, all of them. But back to the Bringers of Flame. When you have a lone jump pack Canoness, it can be really annoying to kill them. And they can do damage quite a bit themselves. If you have a Halberd, then you don't need to worry about hand flamers and enhancements, you just go for as many attacks as possible. They have their own close combat devastating wound ability. You can fly them into something and kill as much as possible, and then you can still have them around to complete actions and score primary and secondary missions. You can add a survival element like the Iron Surplus, and having a tough Canoness works in the three main, non-penitent detachments. A lone Dialogus is the cheapest character to do that for right now. If she goes up by 20 points, which is not impossible, then the Canoness on foot is a good replacement, or generally a good choice. If there is an action you need to complete after your opponent's turn, then being able to trigger a 2+ invulnerable save in your opponent's shooting phase or close combat phase will let you do that. To say nothing of just using Shield of Aversion when you have the Iron Surplus on so that you're staying at your 2+ save, and you also have a 5+ Feel No Pain, as well as an invulnerable save. It's a tough character to try and break. Your Dominions want to stay near a transport. If the enemy comes closer, you reactive move and jump back into the transport. As long as your transport doesn't die, well, in that turn you could jump back out and get revenge for the damage done to the transport, or in your next turn, get out and use Rites of Fire. And this can work really well with a Repressor. If the enemy charges you from outside 9 inches, then you can get back into the transport when the enemy tries to charge you. But that can also work with Retributors, and then if the Repressor is destroyed, the Retributors have a target of Retribution to get full rerolls to wound. Please do not have Retributors and a Dialogus jump out of an Immolator. Not at the current points level following the June 2024 points update. This was a tactic that worked for about half an hour in February 2024 before the points changed again. Immolators no longer give you full rerolls to wound, and for all of the points you're paying for the Immolator, the Retributors, and the Dialogus, you need to kill something like a Land Raider to get your points back, and maybe your opponent doesn't have a Land Raider. Or maybe they do, and it has massive flamers that just overwatch you and destroy your unit. If you want to use Retributors, have them in a vehicle, Rhino or Immolator, and wait. When a valuable enemy has destroyed one of your units, then the Retributor's ability changes from reroll wound rolls to 1 to reroll all wound rolls. Then you can move your transport up from where it was hidden in your deployment zone, zoom up with Carry Forth the Faithful, and get out to strike that target. You can add Astrid and Agatha to get devastating wounds on your multi-melters, but that is getting expensive again. Or you have Retributors with heavy flamers. They will be strength 7 in this detachment, and you don't need the battle standard babes, just the cleansing flame stratagem. Now you have 4 heavy flamers and a hand flamer with full rerolls to wound, and you can try and get as many 6s as possible. The ones that aren't are still high strength, so they'll be wounding enemy vehicles on 5s, and enemy lighter vehicles like Scout Sentinels on a 4+. Look, Melter Guns are good in this detachment, Flamers are great in this detachment. Some mix of both of them is good. Aside from specific units, which are mostly focused around the Battle Sisters in vehicles, there are army-wide tactics you can use. Overwatch is an amazing stratagem. It is basically double firing for your torrent weapons. That is how you get more use of the Fire and Fury enhancement from your Seraphim unit. The other way to essentially double fire is Blazing Ire. There's no penalty on those shots. And just telling your opponent that that is something you can do can discourage them from attacking your transport at all. Which means that you have free reign to move and disembark wherever you want and attack whatever you want, not limited by the stratagem. Now, for tactics, whether on foot or in transports, do not run in screaming for the Emperor and die like I did. I got better. I improved my tactics, because losing half your army in Battle Round 1 is not fun. Speed is an advantage, not a requirement. If you want to have an army with like compulsory speed, then you should go and play orcs. Speed lets you prepare for the right time to attack. Wait until turn 3 and then go zoom. You can zoom out from your deployment zone. Having a Rhino hidden in your deployment zone gives you a rapid reaction unit to deal with problems like enemy deep strike, enemy reserves, the sudden collapse of one of your units as you fluff a load of armor saves, and now you need another unit in that gap. A Rhino and Carry Forth the Faithful will do that for you. So here's a more sensible 1000 point and 2000 point list with transports. For 1000 points, I have a Palatine and Dominions in an Immolator. The Immolator splits the Dominion squad, so you now have 5 sisters with a simulacrum that can stay on your home objective. The Palatine joins the Dominion in the Immolator, and because of the Dominion special ability, the Palatine gains Scout only on the understanding that they are all going to be in a transport and starting to transport together as an attached unit. Then she gets Scout as well. That unit can move up and hit something hard, and then the Palatine can get into combat. I have this squad with melter guns because in the other Dominion squad, they can have bolt guns and flamers, both of which are clearing enemy infantry. The melter guns will be able to take on tanks, and the Palatine, with their ability to cause mortal wounds, can also fight big enemy monsters and vehicles. I have 10 sisters and a Canoness and a Hospitaller in a Rhino. I chose the Hospitaller because we're going for more general resistance. Even though the shield reversion won't be keeping them to a 2+ save, it's still there as an option with the Canoness. Staying at a 3+ save is pretty good, and not many enemies are going to be firing AP -2 or 3 weapons at you in a 1000 point game. The Rhino drives them onto an objective. The sisters get out, and in your next turn, you will plant your sister flag, defend the faith. That is now your objective for the rest of the game, unless the enemy tries to take it off you. But it means that when you're playing a 1000 point game, there is often that side objective that is barely touched. That is going to be your objective, and then the sisters get back into the Rhino and get back into the fight. Even when the Rhino is moving them away, they can't disembark in the same turn they embarked, but there is a firing deck, so you can fire something like the multi-melter and your special weapon of choice from the top of the Rhino. And my third transport is Dominions. These can scout up, these can try and take an objective right away. If the enemy has infiltrating units on that objective, we can clear them pretty quickly with our flamers and our bolt guns. There are 5 Seraphim, which are there to drop down and remove enemies from their home objective. They tend to be pretty lightly defended. Hand Flamers will do that, and then you have a unit in the enemy backfield to complete secondary missions that require you to be in the enemy deployment zone. Having 10 Seraphim plus the Canoness plus the enhancement is far too many points in a 1000 point game. You leave so many objectives open and try and just kill as many enemies as possible, but while you're doing that, you're losing victory points. While the Army of Faith has a stratagem to increase armor penetration of your units, we don't have that in Bringers of Flame, but we do have a Castigator. Whatever the Castigator shoots, as long as it hits something with one of its weapons, whatever else you shoot at that, the enemy is going to be -1 to their armor save. And as I've said, you can have either turret on your Castigator. When I figure out more tactics in the future and playtest a bit more, I will let you know what cunning tactics and tricks work and don't work. This is why you should click the subscribe button now. So here is a 2000 point list for the Bringers of Flame detachment. It does things a little bit differently, and I'm going to explain this in another video linked here. And that will explain how you play this list at a tournament level. My darlings and viewers, bring the flame!